Hi, this is Dr. Les, and welcome back to our time series, docu-series that we've entitled, I Bought a Farm, So Now What? In this episode, what we're going to talk about is we're going to discuss property maintenance and land maintenance. Because as I sat there and talked with the landowner in the introductory section of this video series, he was just wanted to look at ways to improve the property and maybe, if it's possible, generate enough revenue to cover his taxes and whatever his costs for property maintenance and upkeep were. And so what we're thinking about here in this video is talking about what do we need to consider. Okay, so even if we're not going to do a livestock or cropping enterprise, we still need to take care of our property. We still need to maintain the land. We still need to maintain the soil. And so joining me today is the Woodford County County Agent for Ag and Natural Resources, Adam Probst. Adam, welcome.
Thanks, Les.
And Adam is going to work with us today as if I'm a producer, as if I'm the owner of that property. And I just called Adam, and we're talking about things that I need to consider to keep my property in great shape, to keep the soil in great shape, to keep the property from devaluing. So maybe if someday I want to sell it, it maintains its value, or if this enterprise that we decide to jump into it works out. So Adam, you haven't seen my farm, so I'm going to show you my farm. And to do that, I've got to share the screen. And so hopefully here in a second, the Google Earth map will pop up. Do you see that now?
There we go.
All right, great. So the property that we're talking about is in two different sections. Up here at the top of the screen is a just under 33 acre set of property, acreage. And then we're also going to utilize this little section down here, which is about 5 acres, just a little bit under 5 total acres. I know you know Woodford County topography very well, and this is off of Highway 33 down toward the southern end of the county. And to say that area is rolling is a little bit of an understatement.
It's rolling, and it's some thin, shallow soils.
Thin, shallow soils, and this farm in particular, the bigger piece of property, is a hill farm. I mean, where the little pointer is flat, and that's on top of the hill, and it probably was used as a tobacco patch at one point in time in its history, just because it is fenced off from the rest of the property. It's flat, and my guess is the soil there is not too bad, honestly, but that's just a guess. The gate to the rest of the property's here, and then it kind of winds around into completely undeveloped pasture. Okay. You can see where there's been weeds. The grass isn't super thick. I don't see any evidence of any sort of legume or anything. It's probably just good old fashioned Kentucky 31. And it's in what I would consider as pretty undeveloped pasture land. There's a water source here. This is a spring-fed pond, okay, that has never been dry, according to the property owner. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here so we can see this a little better. The tobacco barn, which again leads me to believe that was a tobacco patch. There's a little lot right here that's fenced in with pretty much brand new woven wire fence. And so we have a nice little entry. Here's the entry to the farm. A nice little entry lot to the tobacco barn, and then the rest of the property out here. One thing that the property owner did do when they purchased the property is they put in a water tank here where I've got it pointed. And it is city water. And so he's got two water sources, this city water and that pond, decent perimeter fence, really good down here by the barn, but the rest of it is just decent. And the biggest thing is it lies on a hill, which really doesn't help us with any sort of agriculture, row crop, or enterprise like that. This segment of the property is one of the property owners lives right here. This is out in front of his house. He recently just fenced this off because his daughter is going to talk him into horses here in the next year or two. But right now, it's just fenced off. There's a water source. I believe it's here, and there is a division there. But the water source is down here, and it's city water. We do have access to the water line up here on this side if we needed to do anything else. But this is Clear Creek, and this farm is on a pretty severe slope with a high point here and the low point there, and I would say that's somewhere in that 6 to 7% slope. But it's pretty steep, and again, it's just undeveloped pasture, cool season grass property that's part of this farm. And actually, he just threw that little 4 to 5 acre thing in here just the other day when I was talking to him, because our original plan was for this 33 acres. So Adam, that kind of gives you, I'll stop sharing my, because normally if I was the property owner, we'd be going across the property together.
Right.
Today. And so, but in today's climate of social distancing and the global pandemic, we'll have to do it the new way, I guess. So that's the property that we're going to use in this video. Again, their overall goal is to maintain or improve the property. They would like to get enough income off of it to pay the taxes and to help pay for the improvements that they make on it, whether they're just putting up fence, maybe they'll put another water in or two if the cattle stuff works out. But if nothing else, if someday they decide to sell it, they want to sell a property that's worth more than when they bought it, right? So what are some of the things that and we'll pretend that I'm the landowner. What are some of the things that I, as a landowner, need to do to maintain and improve the property that I just purchased, whether it be for my kids someday or if I want to sell it someday?
Well, usually the first thing I'll tell any landowner, and sometimes even if they're looking for a farm and are looking at a farm in particular, I'll usually say go take a soil sample. Getting an idea of what the properties of those soils are on the farm is going to be a good indication of maybe what you can do with the farm, what kind of previous history it's had, and what kind of investment it's going to take to get it to where it needs to be with what you want to do with it.
When you said properties, what of the soil, what exactly do you mean by that?
So when we talk about soil properties, there's lots of different chemical properties, physical properties. Most of our soil testing is going to look at the chemical properties of the soil. So your soil pH, which is just an indication of the amount of acidity in that soil. We'll also look at some nutrient levels that are required for plant function. Phosphorus, potassium are a couple of our big ones that we look at. We can also look further and look at others like zinc or some of the micronutrients like boron and manganese and different ones like that. But getting an idea of what are some of the chemical properties of that soil can give us an indication of maybe what are the best crops to grow there. If our soil pH is really high or really low, that's going to say, well, maybe we need to really think about what we're wanting to put in there. If we're just wanting to keep it in a grass cover like this property is, it's still a good idea to do that because we still want to maintain the grass stands that are there, or that vegetation that's there. So even if it's just wooded forest land, it's still a good idea to get a soil test. Maybe there's some things we can do to improve that woodland, or whatever area of that property we're wanting to look at. So that's usually the first step I tell folks to take.
So if we had that 33 acres, okay, well, let's count it all, the 38 acres, and I didn't do anything, didn't soil test, didn't fertilize, didn't mow, didn't do anything. What would happen to it?
So eventually it's going to go back to what we like to call a natural state. It's going to get overgrown with probably a lot of undesirable plants starting out, at least in that area of the county. It's going to probably turn over to multiflora rose bushes and blackberry vines, and then we'll get some saplings of some invasive species like eastern bush honeysuckle is one that we have a hard time with, at least in Woodford County. It would start coming in. If we don't do anything to maintain that, it's eventually going to revert back to its natural state of some sort of forest land, woodland type area. It would take several years for it to do that. But as it's transforming into that, you're going to get a lot of undesirables. You get a lot of invasives, like I talked about. We get a lot of invasive species across the country, and there's a reason they are invasive, and that's because they thrive well in those environments. So we'll get a lot of stuff that would make that property undesirable if we were to sell it or want to do something with it in the future.
Yeah, it really reduces the overall property value if you've got 33 acres of multiflora rose, honeysuckle, and cedar. I don't know if volunteer cedar trees are a problem here, but
correct.
I grew up in Missouri, and if you leave a property unmaintained, the next thing you know, you've got a whole bunch of cedar trees, and yeah, it's not worth anything.
Right.
So okay, well, so you've convinced me. I've got to do a soil test if I want to maintain my property's value and to have any opportunity to develop an enterprise which might help us pay a few bills on that property. How do I do that? I mean, what are the steps to get that soil sample taken? Do I just say, hey, Adam, here's the farm, come out? What do I do?
So you'd start by, you can call the extension, your local extension office. So in our case, you'd call me or call one of the staff at our office and say, you'd like to have a soil sample done. We actually have some equipment that you can check out to do that free of cost. There's a lot of, not every county office, but a lot of county offices throughout the state offer some free soil testing. We're fortunate enough, we are a county that does for Woodford County residents. So a lot of times it doesn't cost you anything except a few minutes of your time to go do it. But coming to our office, checking out that soil probe, getting some soil sample bags that you would put your samples in to send to the lab. You can get all that through the local extension office. And then being able to take that out and we can give you some direction on, how to properly sample and looking at your property and that sort of thing.
So. All right. And then so you'll get that soil sample taken. If I take it myself, then I'll just bring it to the office.
Bring it back to us at the office, and we'll help you fill out the information, and we'll take that onto the laboratory for you and get those results back. And when those results come back, we'll actually, when we sit down with you initially, we'll figure out what you're wanting to do with that part of the property. And in this situation, if we're wanting to do just maintain a grass cover of what's there, we'll list all that, and we'll actually make recommendations based on those results of what you need to do with those fields, with those pastures, with those areas of the property to optimize the production or optimize the use of that part of the property. So,
and then I would go to Woodford Feed or Southern States or one of the other companies here locally and give them the recommendations and tell them, get me up to snuff. Right?
Right. So in this case, I would sit there and I would write pretty much a prescription for that field, saying you need to put on, so many pounds of maybe it's some phosphorus or potassium. We'll write a prescription for that field. And then that's something you can take to the fertilizer dealer, whether it's Woodford Feed, Southern States, or whoever, and tell them, this is what we want to apply on this area, and that's something that they can take to the field and do that and apply those.
Perfect. Adam and his son are going to go out and demonstrate, and take a video demonstrating how to do a good soil sample. But in the efforts of maintaining social distance, I'm going to let Adam and his family take care of that, and he'll send me the video. And I'll just splice that in here so that people can see how to take a soil sample.
Well, now that we're in the field ready to take our soil sample, there's going to be 3 tools that we're going to have to take with us to the field. The first one's going to be our soil probe that we're actually going to take cores out of the ground. Second one's going to be a bucket. We're going to take a multitude, usually around 10 cores that will go into one sample. And then the last thing we're going to need is our sample bag that we will submit to the lab. So when we're ready to take our sample, we're going to look at the field, look at the layout of the field. We're going to try to avoid a few areas like livestock waters, like you see behind me, that might be in the field, areas of shade or barns, pretty much anything that might indicate that animals or groups of animals would have loafed or stayed in one area. We're going to try to avoid areas of shade or different wooded areas that might be in that field. And we're going to kind of look at how the field is shaped. If it's a large field that we're going to have multiple topographic areas in, we might sample a ridge separate than the slope and separate than the bottom of that field. If the field is fairly uniform and consistent, then we may just take one sample for that entire field. When we actually take our sample, we're going to go through the field, and we're going to take, in this situation, with a pasture, we're going to take a core depth of about 4 inches. So we're going to take our probe, push it straight in the ground about 4 inches. If we look on the probe, we'll see that there's actually a mark on here that indicates a 6-inch depth. So we want to stay just a little bit below that. We're going to take our core out, and we're going to mix it in our bucket. And as we go through the field, now we've collected 10 of our 10 cores throughout the field. We're going to make sure that they are broken up. We don't want them in big chunks. We also want to make sure that it's dry. If for whatever reason the soil is wet, ideally we would take that and lay it out on some newspaper or put it in the sample bag and leave the tops open on the bag for a few days to let that soil dry out. The rule of thumb is we really don't want water be able to be squeezed out of the soil sample. We generally like to sample soil in the spring and fall just from the soil moisture availability. If soil is too dry, it can skew some results. If soil is too wet, it can also skew some results. So generally spring and fall is a good time to get out here and do that. All right, now that we've got our 10 cores, we've got it in our bag, there's a few other things we want to go over. One is on the bags, we actually have a mark line that we want to fill up to. It generally is about 2 cups of soil to fill that up, or about those 10 cores that we went through the field and field. Also on that sample bag, we want to put our name as a producer, and then whatever identifying features we want to call that field. We may call that the back field, we may call that field number 4. Whatever features that you want to identify that field as, so that you know what the results, or which field the results go to when you get those results back from the lab. So once you get your results back from the lab, they will look a lot like this, where you can see on the top of the sample report there, you'll see the date that the sample was received from the lab, the sample ID, which is what you called that field, whether it was, backfield, field 4. In this case, this field was called field 2 PVF. Then there's some other lab IDs and owner IDs that don't have a lot of bearing on the actual results. But below that, we'll have on the left-hand column of that table all your nutrients that we're primarily interested in: phosphorus, potassium, soil pH, buffer pH, calcium, magnesium, zinc. And then if there's any other tests that were performed, will be listed there as well. The second column there, you'll see the actual lab results. And then right in the middle of that table is the level of adequacy. And you can see in this case, this field came back very high in phosphorus and potassium, and high in magnesium. The soil pH was 6.2. So for this field, in a cool season grass, we try to target for a pH of 6.4, so we're very close to that. Now the bottom two rows in this table, you can see more specific information on what is going on in that field. You can see the acreage of that field. The primary crop is going to be the crop that's going to be grown in that field. The primary management is what we're interested in doing in that field, whether we're going to be doing some new seeding. In this case, it's just an annual top dressing. We're trying to figure out if there's any more nutrients we need to apply to this field. You can also see the primary use is going to be pasture. Then below that, the actual recommendations are what's going to be applied to that field, or what's going to be recommended to be applied to that field. In this case, there's some additional comments you don't see on the screen here for nitrogen, and actually there's no fertilizer that's being required or recommended for phosphorus, potassium, or any lime to adjust the soil pH. So below this, usually I will make recommendations as to the amount of any kind of fertilizer that may need to be applied and when best to apply it. Hopefully this is something you can take to the fertilizer dealer, whether it be somebody like Woodford Feed or Southern States, and show them these are the fields that you've got, and this is the kind of the prescription of fertilizer that we want to put on there and when we would like to get it performed.
So Adam, other than soil samples, what are some other things that we need to consider about property maintenance, or to help maintain the value or improve the value of our property?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, about if we don't do any mowing and we don't do anything, it's going to turn back to that natural state. So generally, mowing of a property, at least those areas of the property that might have that ability to do that, is probably going to be pertinent at least a couple times a year, mainly for weed control and that sort of thing. You can have a lot of, mentioned a few minutes ago, some invasives come in. Trying to keep those from coming in is going to be the big thing, because once they become established, they're going to be really hard to control after the fact.
Yeah.
So being able to go in and mow a lot of plants while they're small, or keeping the stand that's there healthy, is going to keep those invasives from coming in. So a lot of times mowing is going to be something that we're going to look at as far as maintenance. Sometimes tree and brush removal, something a lot of times we don't think about, can be important, especially in fence rows, that sort of thing, or even in some wooded areas of the property. We can see it just makes those areas more inaccessible to do those mowings, to do those any kind of weed control or any kind of maintenance that you might want to do in the future. The other thing to kind of think about is, especially when you look at some of the improvements on the farm, like fences, barns, being able to identify any issues that might arise with those. I always encourage folks to come into the extension office and sit down if you've got some issues. There's a lot of financial incentive programs that are out there, either through the extension office or conservation programs, or some federal USDA programs. So we can hopefully help a lot of folks financially, maintain some of those things. There's a life expectancy to all of those. So, you might have bought a property that's got a nice perimeter fence around it, or it had a perimeter fence at one point, and it's all fallen down, and it might have been put up 50 or 60 years ago, and typically that's exceeded its life expectancy. So trying to replace some of those. There are some programs out there that we like to connect people with, and the more that at least myself as an extension agent can know about your property, the more we can help you, in identifying maybe these are some financial programs that we can get you signed up for to help you maintain those items on the property, those improvements. So
yeah, there are a lot of programs that I would say a vast majority of the population of landowners don't realize are available to them to help them with improvements. Some of those monies that for cost share come from the Ag Development Board and the Governor's Office of Ag Policy, where or tobacco settlement funds, however people want to think about that. And then, like you said, some of them come from the Conservation Department. So lots of opportunities to make property improvements that are available, just with great communication and interaction with your local county agent for agriculture. Anything else, Adam? Anything that we haven't mentioned yet?
I think that's going to hit most of it. The one thing that we do try to promote a lot, at least in Kentucky, is getting with your conservation district or your extension agent and doing an ag water quality plan. A lot of times in those ag water quality plans, it might identify some areas that you didn't think about that you might need to work on maintaining or better maintenance on. And it's actually it's a state law in the state of Kentucky. Anybody that owns 10 acres or more has to have an ag water quality plan on file for that property. So, as in the case of this farm, making sure we've got a water quality plan on file at the conservation office, and looking and seeing, and a lot of times, like I said, in those plans, we can identify some certain areas that maybe that you as a landowner may not have thought of, that something you might need to do a better job maintaining. So,
well, I'm sure it has an ag water quality plan. Everybody has it, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
So if that may be another episode that we get to do, huh?
It might be.
So awesome. Well, I appreciate, Adam, your participation in the last 2 episodes. I think they've been fantastic. We need to do more publicizing. Excuse me, right. I'm not getting that word out. But we don't really publicize the extension office and very often, and the many programs that are available. One of which is to help people with their property maintenance and value. And thanks a lot for joining us. Okay. Thank everybody that's watching this video. Episode 4, we'll be having Dr. Kenny Burdine, and he's going to jump into enterprise analysis with us. And so, in other words, what we're going to do is we're going to look at, what different operations could we possibly run on this 38 acres. And again, Adam, thanks, and we'll see everybody next time on I Bought a Farm. Now what?